Welcome to the Winging It F1 podcast after the Belgian Grand Prix, probably one of the weirdest F1 races for quite some time. I'm with Adam Dickinson. Freddie's still not back. He will be back soon, though, hopefully. He's still having fun on the beach somewhere in the east of the world, west of the world, not east of the world.
Somewhere in the world.
Somewhere, yeah. It was. How are you doing, Adam? I nearly forgot again.
I'm good apart from a completely wasted morning. Yeah, it's I don't know. I'm not best pleased that that's 3.5 hours, 4 hours that I'm never going to get back again. But there's lots to talk
Not the
about
first
here.
time you said that.
But yeah, there's lots to talk about here, so looking forward to discussing that.
Yes, no, definitely is. Where do we start? We start with the race, of course, but I mean, can we even call it a race? So they did a few laps behind the safety car. Half points were given. Very wet. Was the right decision made in the end to not? Well, yeah, two. I guess there's two things. Was the right decision made in the end to have a go, and should they have given out points?
I don't think they should have given out points for it because I just don't. It's rewarding qualifying. I think it just seems to be. I'm really happy, particularly that Russell got his podium, which is fantastic for him after he missed out on probably a race win in Sakir last year, and I think that's fantastic. But I just, there wasn't any racing. It was entirely laps behind the safety car and points rewarded for the race, and to kind of effectively award the points for the qualifying just to get, I don't know, the scores on the board or something, just seems quite weird. But I see why they did it, but I don't think it's the right thing.
Okay, I think I wouldn't have minded if they didn't, but equally I don't mind that they have in a way. I'm not. I don't have much of an opinion about whether they should have or shouldn't.
Makes a change.
Yeah, I know. Weird, isn't it? So because if you take away the points from Russell to get P2, that would hurt quite a bit. I feel, but then again, I shouldn't look at it just because Russell did well. I should look at it because of if it happens next race or whatever. So it's a tough one. I think I know Hamilton after the race. He said it was all about money basically, and he did it. Well, not money. First to have a race and for money because you need to have a race to fill contractual obligations and stuff like that. So yeah, is there anything of that you make, or do you want to respond to my point, which wasn't the point?
No, I get where you're coming from, and kind of with with individual drivers, it's good, and like Ricciardo's now got his best finish of the season and stuff like that. So yeah, I get it, but it's just I just think the race is where points should be awarded for, and it's not. I just don't see why. I get why they did the safety car, running behind the safety car to assess whether it was viable to race on that. I understand kind of that aspect of it. And they had, a lot of things going around, particularly the medical car doing a lot of laps, which was either just for the TV cameras or for a Mercedes advert or to feed back to the stewards about the drivability of the track. But I don't see how you can just, give points for such minimal running personally. And, it's in the championship battle, it's not, it might be significant. It might not be for a lot of positions and Constructors' Championship as well. We don't know until the end of the season. But yeah, I think, it's not to take away from the achievements of any of the qualifiers. Verstappen putting it on pole was fantastic by him, and he really nailed that final lap when the pressure was up. And obviously Russell, Vettel, Ricciardo, all did fantastically. But F1's not kind of rewarding 12.5 points for that, or 9 points for that, really, is what I think.
Maybe it's because Freddie isn't here to give a different opinion, but because like it's just me and you have kind of like guided me towards your view because I think you are right. There wasn't any green flag running, there wasn't any racing, so I think you are right. They perhaps shouldn't have given any points. So yeah,
Mm.
you
I
are you
think,
have yeah. Go on.
yeah, on the wider point, I think it was the right decision not to race.
Mm.
Particularly Eau Rouge, and I don't know whether we'll talk about that this week or next week or next podcast, but there were some really scary crashes that happened there, particularly the W Series one, and effectively that's what happened with Hubert is that the crash structures on cars are meant to absorb one impact, and that's meant to be it's meant to be hitting the wall or a driver hitting you, and that's that, and they deform to reduce the speed of impact or the force of impact that then pushes through to the driver, and that's their job done. So if you've got someone hitting the wall and then spinning back into the racing line where cars are going, 180 miles an hour, even in the wet, Norris was on his quali lap, he was absolutely pinning it. So, and then you've got coming back onto the track with that on a blind hill, I think, that is extremely dangerous, and, it's not, I think it's quite lucky that no one got seriously hurt this weekend, to be honest. So I think it was the right decision to not race, but maybe some of the route they took to get to that decision raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. I think they made the right decision in the end, but the way they got there wasn't clear. Let's say, to say the least. I mean, they said it was a race start, even though the race start procedure hadn't started, and then they said Perez couldn't be in the race, then he could, and then there was the race window which started, even though the race was delayed to like 3:20. So why did the race window start at 3:00? It was just they all seemed to be making it up as they went along. Is that what would you share?
Oh, 100%. So it was turned it on at 5 to 8 and whatever, and it's like, it's delayed by 20 minutes, and then it's delayed by another 5 minutes, and then they eventually got going at 20 past or 25 past and did a few laps behind the safety car. And throughout that, it was just kind of put as the warm-up laps or multiple formation laps in terms of the graphics and the imagery and what the TVs were showing and the information they were giving us about it was multiple formation laps under the safety car before the start, and then they all pulled back into the pit lane, and they hadn't started the race, but there'd been a race clock, which is a 3-hour clock for the race to be completed, and it had started at 3:00 local time, which is when the race was meant to start, but obviously it hadn't started, which just seemed really bizarre that, I understand what the race clock there for, but starting it at 25 minutes before the Grand Prix actually kicks off or doesn't kick off just seemed bizarre. Then there was Red Bull asking if they could put Perez back in because he crashed on the way to on the way to the grid, which we haven't even mentioned so far because that's how much of a crazy morning for me and afternoon for you it was. And so he was in his garage and Red Bull was saying, "Oh, can we fix his car?" And at the start, the FIA said no. And then Red Bull said, "Well, the race hasn't actually started yet. We've just done formation laps, and that's that." And they said, "Oh yeah, I'll go on then." So he would have started from the pit lane if things had actually got underway. And there was just this big thing about has the race started or hasn't it? Because it seemed like Michael Massey and the race directors, and stewards didn't think it had started, but then were using the rules of a race being underway to talk to Red Bull, and everyone was confused. No one knew if the race had started or not. And in the end, they went back out for a few more laps at the end, and that was all behind the safety car as well, and then pulled in. And that's that. It was a really strange morning, and just bizarre. And I don't understand how they can't communicate all of that. It's really, really massive breakdown in communication.
It's their job. I mean, they should know these rules. I mean, did they know that what was coming? They should be prepared, really. And 5 years ago, I think about 5 years ago, they had this change with the new formation lap start and stuff like that. Well, what it used to be was they rolled out the pit lane and then the race would start and then you'd get the lap counter. It would go up. It goes up, doesn't it? It goes like 1, 2, 3, depending on how many laps you do behind the safety car. And then they just tried to do it, and then they'd have the 2-hour race clock. And then if it's a red flag, that stops. And then obviously the laps stop as well. And then that's all it has to be. It doesn't have to be, you don't need to be taking laps away every time a delayed message comes up or whatever's in the regulations now, which is baffling. It seems so overcomplicated.
Yeah, definitely. And like the race clock just seems such a necessary thing anyway, because it's not kind of timing in itself isn't a barrier. It's mainly light is what, a track that's not designed for night racing is what you need. And so that's kind of the limiting factor really in terms of going later in the day. But yeah, and then they stopped it, and then they kind of spend the whole time saying, oh yeah, and then we've got 2 hours left, and now we've got 1.5 hours left. And then with an hour left, they stopped it and just said, oh yeah, well we overruled that. And it was just completely bizarre in every way. And yeah, I completely agree. It doesn't need to be that complicated. It doesn't need to be written down that complicated either. It just, have some common sense applied to the rules, and hopefully they'll go away and look at these afterwards, because it's a bit of a farce really. It's certainly not professional. You look at the money that F1 is worth and goes into F1 and the amount of followers they have on social media and the kind of standing it has in the sporting world. It is one of the premier sports worldwide, and you just see this and it just looks totally unprofessional. And it's like something you see in non-league football or something like that. It's just it's not what you'd expect from such a mega financial organization.
And we've spoken a bit in the past, like since we started the podcast just over a year ago, about how Michael Massey, some decisions in the FIA with safety, they've been questionable. And I kind of think today it kind of summed it all up in a way, or it kind of like summed up of how they are. And like, do you think it kind of puts Massey's, I don't know if I should say job, but his role, is he fit for it? Is that too harsh of a question? Because it seems to me there's a lot of decisions he's made which you think, why is he doing this? Does he know what he's doing? Does he fully understand the rules, kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And, just really like basic things like in Turkey last year, and they put, started qualifying again. Well, things were slow. It's not difficult. It's, and I understand they should have nailed it today, but I can understand, it's a high pressure and completely, it's the first time this has happened, or the first time in a long time that this has happened. So, I can understand a bit more, but there just seems to be basic things. Or yesterday with qualifying and starting Q3, when you had drivers, particularly Vettel, saying it's too wet, and then Norris hits the wall, and it's like, oh, well, now it's a red flag. Like that, it's just decisions like that. And, I think we've had this discussion a few times, and that kind of tells its own story, that we've been having this discussion several times on the podcast. But I think sometimes it just feels like decisions are being made for the TV and for the viewership first. And other times it just feels like they don't know what's going on, or there's not a kind of clear plan and clear procedure of what's happening. And today it was just completely them making it up as they go along. It was, between everything and the clock running and not running, and whether it started, and Perez, they U-turned or doubled back on so many things. It's so unclear. And, a lot of the time the Crofty and Brundle were getting there ahead of them, and they were saying, oh, it should be this. And then like in, half an hour's time, then the FIA would go, oh yeah, actually it's this, or Michael Massey. So
then that would confuse Brundle and Crofty, because they're like, wait, oh, what? I mean,
So I think there needs to be like a review into this and kind of look at it. And I agree, but equally it's not, you can't just kind of throw someone straight in there. So I don't know, there's a big training procedure and all of that to it. So I don't know kind of the logistical aspects of, whether they can bring someone in or not. But I think there's certainly Massey's performance since stepping in leaves a lot to be desired on a lot of fronts, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad. I'm glad we didn't get racing because I mean, back to the original point, it was too dangerous. The visibility. I mean, the visibility was the problem. I don't think the rain, or at least in my opinion, I don't think the rain or the wet track was actually the issue. And I was thinking, like, why is this happening? Because in the past they would have raced in these conditions or whatever. But I kind of feel since we went to these bigger, wider cars in 2017 with the bigger tires as well, is that creating more spray, which is why we had a problem today. Because I mean, we haven't had a race like this or such a wet race since Brazil 2016. I don't think there's been a race since then. So I just wonder if these wider cars, like indirectly, they're creating a lot more spray. And yes, it's at Spa as well, in the forests and the fog and the rain, the mist hangs around. But I reckon that could have been a bit of an issue because I think the actual weather was all right.
I'd agree with that. I think the F3, especially the race today, before the F1, some of that going, you kind of, because of the camera angles, you'd see them going onto the camera straight side by side, and then it had switched to the camera at Lake Coombe, or air shot at Lake Coombe, and it'd just be spraying. You'd just be waiting for the cars to appear. And, then they kind of appear in a different order or the same order or, whatever, however they were there. So, yeah, I think it's a factor. I think, as I say, with the F3, it shows it was pretty biblically wet conditions, but, I don't think F1 has struggled to race in those in the past necessarily, but also I think the Spa factor and Eau Rouge factor played a big role in it. And yeah, especially what's happened earlier this weekend and the amount of criticism they got for running the race and then Norris's crash. I think all of that played into it as well. That, yeah, I think that's it. But I agree that the tyres, especially in bigger cars, will have played into that.
Yeah, I mean, the wet tyres. I mean, in qualifying, we saw, didn't they? They just didn't want to use them because the performance wasn't there for whatever reason. So I do think that needs to be sorted out. I don't think the wet tyre compound is quite well. I don't think it's good enough, quite frankly, because these kind of days it should work, but it didn't work all weekend. And in fact, the wet tyre compound has not worked for a long time. But I feel like I've kind of had this opinion for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one because teams only use wet tyres when they absolutely have to because there's so little tread in contact with the asphalt compared to the intermediates. So, we saw Russell going out for Q1 on intermediate tyres, and he was, so both Williams actually, and they were so much faster than the rest of the field. So I think their job is basically for clearing the track, or it's kind of for putting on in these conditions, and they can clear the track and they can spin at water. But I think the idea is more for when it's not actually raining, or when there's been very heavy rain, but the rain's not continuing to come down. But yeah, like you say, this is the time where they should be used, and they should be perfect for these conditions, and the fact that they weren't and they couldn't race kind of puts a big question mark over that. And hopefully something that they'll look at. But I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, it was wet all weekend, wasn't it? And then qualifying, let's talk a bit about that. It was a fantastic qualifying session. I mean, let's talk about Lando Norris first. It looks like if he didn't crash, he would have been in first place quite possibly because he was on it all the way through. So much confidence in the car in Q1 and Q2, but then he just made a mistake. I think. I mean, it was raining hard, but I do think it was a driver error. Am I being harsh?
No, I think that's fair. It's so tough on him because as you say, he was on it all through the qualifying. Did he lead each session? I can't remember, but he was just absolutely fantastic. Yeah, he led the first 2 sessions, and he was just a joy to watch. Really, he was, extracting so much from the car, and he potentially could have had a win, which is really, it's so gutting for him. And again, it's another one like with the camera angles. You kind of saw him going down into Eau Rouge and then coming up, and then he kind of disappeared behind the trees because they had the helicopter shot on, and he was, a bit behind the trees, and then he just doesn't come out. And then about a second or 2 seconds later, you see him spinning out. And fantastic that he was all right, but I think it was just a little correction, then that pitched him into the wall. And it's especially with it being on a hillside, it's such a difficult corner in the rain, and it's different every time he ran it, and he was showing absolute commitment there. And I think he would have got pole, but as it was, it just wasn't meant to be, and it's really tough for him. But that set up a battle for pole between Russell, Hamilton and Verstappen, which was just unbelievable. Really.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. Russell, he set it all up for one big effort at the end, and what an effort it was! Unbelievable. Hamilton couldn't go faster. Verstappen pipped him at the end. I'll be honest, I kind of wanted Verstappen to lock up at the bus stop chicane final corner, so Russell got pole.
Yeah,
it was a monumental lap. One of the best performances I've ever seen in F1. It was just crazy. And a Williams, 8th fastest car, 748 fastest car. Spa-Francorchamps, iconic track, incredible lap. I think it has to be the performance of the year so far. In fact, I don't think he'll be beaten this year, quite frankly, unless he gets pole position next time out or something.
Better than Alonso at Hungary?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was brilliant. It was, even if they went for a wet setup or whatever, to do that in a Williams, to beat Hamilton in a Mercedes, that's not right. I mean, mad.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like it looks like people, something people do just, for trolling, or they'll put like Russell second place bar in big letters and then like put a little like sentence in between, like Russell can see second place or something like that to make it true. But it's just, I couldn't believe it. And I thought Hamilton was going to improve, and then he didn't. And then for Russell to come across the line, and I was so hoping, he kind of Verstappen always looked like he'd do it in the last sector.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Russell, but again, another driver who could have had their first race win. It's just unbelievable, and I was just shocked. It's just not something we're used to at all. Even like, we've had more mixed up results in the race, and Ocon last race is a good example of that, but not, in qualifying, we don't see that very often at all, that any of the minnows are able to push ahead, because it's such a kind of purer test of the car and the driver. And, particularly the car has such a big bearing on that, and there's not many ways that luck or circumstance or whatever can come into it. But on this occasion, it didn't. It's incredible for him that he got the second place. Really tough that he didn't get pole and a win. But it's just such a wow moment, and in a weekend that will live long in the memory for good and bad reasons. I think that will definitely be a factor in that.
Yeah. Now, maybe there's always another side to the story with Russell. So what I will say is, Lance Stroll has done it before, hasn't he? In Monza 2017, Hulkenberg did it Brazil 2010. He got pole position. Stroll got 4th, I think, in Monza. And even Bottas, when he was at Williams, 2013 Canadian Grand Prix, not many people remember this. He qualified 3rd in the wet, and Williams were pretty bad that year as well. I think they finished 8th or 9th, something like that, in the constructor standings that year. So it has been done before, not to kill the Russell party or anything, but yeah, I just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but equally, it's kind of they've been so bad over the last few years, and yeah, to be actually in provisional pole, say the Hulkenberg when he did it, that wasn't as bad a Williams by any stretch as they have been over the last few years, and this one is because it's kind of easy to forget this in the last two rounds, but it's been with the Alphas and the Haas.
Yeah.
It's not been able to get into midfield battle at all in the races, and I think if you look at where Latifi's putting it, that's probably a pretty accurate reflection of its speed and quality at the moment. So, I think I get what you're saying as well, but it's just such a monumental achievement.
That's just me being really annoying. I think.
You did say yesterday that you took back everything negative you've ever said about Russell, so so you need to take back that as well. But yeah, I'm really happy for him that he has got a podium, and just as I say, another incredible kind of picture and image, and seeing him on the formation lap, seeing him running around behind Verstappen in front of Hamilton on the formation lap is just it's going to be iconic. Probably going to take a lot of explaining in future. It's just unbelievable.
Absolutely, and if this is what we're going to get next year, Russell and Hamilton at Mercedes, they're going to be that close. Bring it on. Hopefully that will be announced in the next. Well, they said they won't announce it until before. They said they won't announce it in the next 2 weeks until the triple headers ended. I think. But yeah, we'll hopefully it'll get announced in September sometime. I'm just trying to think what else happened in qualifying. Verstappen pole, obviously Hamilton third. Ricciardo with a good performance. Vettel fifth as well. They both had, I was going to say good weekends, but it was more like a good day that turned into some good points. Is there anything you want to say about them?
I think especially Ricciardo in the season where he struggled to dial into the car and kind of push it to its limits. This is one of the ultimate challenges in F1, really, Spa in the wet. So the way he was, I don't know whether there's much they can take from this in terms of the data and how much of this is transferable to to the rest of the season and to a dry Zandvoort, say, or a dry Monza, sunny Monza. But it's kind of just refreshing to see that and see him celebrating with the fans or trying to orchestrate a Mexican wave. It was really that was one of my favourite bits of the weekend. Just see him so positive, and I hope this can be kind of a turning point, or there is something they can carry over. But even if it's not for this year, just to kind of it shows. It shows that there's still a fantastic driver in there, which I think
I'm not
we've
so
all been
sure.
doubting. Why?
I'm not, because if Norris was there, I think Norris would have been 1.52 seconds ahead, and that's a pretty big margin.
Well, he wasn't because he hit the wall.
I know he wasn't, but
because of a driver error.
In Q1 and Q2, Norris was, I think, 3 seconds ahead in Q1 or something ridiculous. So I'm not. Yeah,
he's from the UK though. It rains all the time. That's the first time Ricciardo's seen rain since the Hungary. No, not. But yeah, he's I get what you're saying, but I'm not going to let it poop my Ricciardo party.
I don't know. I really do think Norris would have been on pole, and the gap would have been about 1.5, 2 seconds, and then we'll be talking differently about this, I think, personally. But I guess he was there to perform, so yeah. But I still don't think it's a turning point.
I'm just glad to see happy Ricciardo again, to be honest. It's nice to see. Happy Ricciardo, it's good.
Yeah. Sorry, you just froze there a minute, but I did hear that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've covered most of qualifying. I mean, the big incident at Eau Rouge, we do have a bit of time to talk about this. So we heard a bit of what you said before, Adam, but do you think they do have to make an actual change to the corner? Because from what I've read, none of the drivers have said that. They've just said they should bring gravel back, they should change the barriers. And I think that's what should happen. I don't think the actual corner needs to change.
Yeah, I don't know. It's such a difficult one because, well, firstly, I don't see what they can really do. Like, it's a track in the hillsides of the Ardennes Forest. It's not, it's not Bahrain or it's not Paul Ricard's. There's not just, acres of flat land that they can build over. So, and bringing back gravel traps has its own problems because, they're kind of less effective at slowing down cars than tarmac, and there's the flipping risk as well if you dig in. So I think people need to look, smarter people than me need to look at it and, take all of those factors into account. And because it's not, it's seeing kind of what's happened there at that corner over the last few years, there is a lot that can go wrong. And, I think it's a more manageable risk in the drive, but you can't have it where every time there's a wet race there, then, it's undrivable, or, the risk factor goes up by so much. So, yeah, I don't really know, because there are problems with gravel and grass as well. And it seems to be the main advocates for that are, that the kind of psychological effect it has on the drivers, which I understand as well. But equally, they can't really push the barriers back anymore because there's a hill in the way. So, yeah, I don't really, I'm not an expert enough on it to comment, but I hope, people do look at it and try and make some changes, because it's, it's quite terrifying when you see crashes like this in the W Series.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'm being, I might have got this wrong, but the W Series crash, with that incident in particular, I feel that could have happened at any other corner because of the way. It is more because of the rain, and I think the drivers all took that line anyway. I think they all kind of misjudged it. Is that? To be fair, I've only seen it a couple of times, so I didn't really want to watch it that much. But from what I saw,
I think I'm similar. I think the kind of, there's three issues that are the speed. Well, mainly the speed and the proximity to the barrier, and the fact that it's a corner. So you are having to change your line, or change where you are in terms of the track. But you're doing it at the speed of a straight, and there's not much wiggle room on the left-hand side if you do hit the barriers. Whereas other corners that are kind of flat out tend to have a lot wider barriers on on the outside. So I think that's the issue, is not necessarily the corner itself, but the proximity of the barriers to it, the fact that it's flat out, and then the fact that if you hit it at an angle, which is kind of what the barriers are designed for, they don't kind of catch you, that you can then bounce back out over the. It doesn't take much to bounce back out over the track, which is maybe something gravel would help with, actually, because that is more effective at slowing cars down kind of once they have hit the barrier. But yeah, I think it's a pretty unique crash, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that one is, but I think you are right. There's been too many incidents. I feel definitely, and with Senna at Tamburello, like the people say that they kind of saw it coming because there've been crashes there before, and Gerhard Berger and stuff, the long left-hander, and then they did eventually change it only after Senna died. So I hope that's what's kind of thinking, like, why I'm thinking, should they change it? Because ultimately people didn't change it in time for Senna's unfortunate death. So I kind of hope the same thing doesn't happen here, and then in 2 years or whatever, we'll say, oh, they should have put a chicane in, or they should have changed the profile, or whatever. But equally, it isn't, I'm really 50-50, but I think my solution would be gravel and Tech Pro barriers, because they don't have them at the moment. And Tech Pro barriers normally absorb the car; they don't bounce back, but they don't bounce out as much. So that's what I would do. Now, obviously, I'm not an expert, but just from crashes we've seen before when they do have technical barriers, I think if Eau Rouge had that, I think that would help a bit. Yeah, that's what
No,
I'd do.
no, I completely get what you're saying, and I'm torn as well because as it is racing, it's kind of that is what's most unique to F1, and it's sometimes obviously we all know that drivers are on the limit, but that is somewhere where you can really see the driver and the car and the physics all on the limit at the fastest speeds in motorsport. And I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think your solution is it sounds a good one. So yeah, it's really difficult because I don't think you can change. If you change it, you've got to leave Spa. I don't really see how you can change the corner that virtual. If you put a chicane in that, it just kind of massively reduces the appeal of racing at Spa. So yeah, it's a really difficult one, and as motorsport fans, we want to see the best racing, and we saw several times in the F3 drivers going side by side through there, and we saw Perez and Gasly last year going side by side, an incredible overtake, but equally we don't want to see massive crashes and driver injuries or fatalities. So it's it's just kind of it's not kind of what's the acceptable risk or not, but I guess looking at how best you can reprofile it while still trying to keep what's special about the corner in the first place, really.
Yeah, definitely. It'd be interesting to see what Freddie says when he's next on. We definitely ask him about that. But in terms of from the rest of the weekend, because we didn't really have a race, I don't think there's many other talking points, Adam, that I can recall.
I thought Alpine's performance was quite surprising, considering they've got Alonso and Ocon, which are two strong wet weather drivers, and Alonso was 14th and Ocon was 9th and last of the Q3 runners by a full second from Bottas. So I was quite surprised by that. If we're kind of looking at performance, Raikkonen was, normally goes well in the wet and that Spa, and he was 19th, which wasn't fantastic. And Lance Stroll, we all know what he can do in the wet or in kind of drying conditions or tough conditions. We saw at Turkey last year and Monza a few years ago, as you've already mentioned. So I think they were probably the biggest surprises, where I thought they'd do better, and they didn't.
Alpine is struggling in wet in Imola as well, I think, in the race. So I guess that could kind of be expected, although they were in good form. Stroll doesn't surprise me. Raikkonen, he's never been the best qualifier, I guess, although, yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I don't know, I think particularly Alpine, it's got to be something with the car, because Alonso and Ocon are really strong in the wet, and, for them to be kind of so far off the pace is not something you'd expect. There was someone else as well, I've forgotten who it was. Oh yeah, Latifi. Is he secretly a wet weather god?
He did spin in Q1, to be fair. I think he's the first driver to spin, but then he...
Yeah, but to be fair, he was on intermediate, so I don't hold that against him too much. But yeah, is he secretly, or is it just the Williams? I don't know, but he's done well a few times. Obviously Hungary was on a drying track, and yeah, so I but that was interesting. But I think just generally looking down the grid, it's a real leveler. Having the rain in there is a real leveler, and just puts Verstappen, Russell, Hamilton, Ricciardo, Vettel, Gasly, Perez. That's
six different teams.
That's a fantastic top 8, and really strong top 7, and they're all really strong drivers, and kind of go well at drivers' tracks, or it's just kind of it's where the cream rises to the top, and I think you can really see that this weekend. In fact, particularly that top 6 actually, with 6 different teams. Just a lot of the time how far ahead they were from their teammates. I think says a lot, and it's fascinating to see that.
Absolutely. And that's what the wet does, doesn't it? It levels the playing field. We get to see the drivers like go for it. We get to see who's best on the day. And it was just a shame we didn't get a race for it. It would have been brilliant, I think. Yeah, just one of those once in a 12-year thing.
I mean, you said we've not had the really memorable race at Spa in a while, and it wasn't memorable for the best reasons, but at least we have had that. I'm really gutted because I think it would have been a fantastic battle. I think Russell up there, I was so ready for him to overtake Verstappen at the end of the Camel Straight. I was like hyped, I was ready. Seeing the Hamilton Verstappen battle, how that played out would have been really fascinating as well.
That would have been
the wet. Oh. Yeah, that would have been brilliant. Obviously Norris kind of making his way up. There would have been so many kind of things to track, and we just didn't get any of that. So I feel really gutted. Obviously, as we said, I think we both agreed that it was the right decision not to race, but I'm gutted that it was in that position and that we weren't able to race because it would have been a race for the ages. So, yeah, I think disappointed with that. The only positive is that it's Zandvoort next week. We've not got a big break.
Yeah.
So, we can come back next weekend and get straight back into it.
Absolutely. And we'll be back with a podcast in a few days to preview that. We'll also probably talk about Perez and Alonso signing their contracts then as well, because that was a bit of news that came out in the last week. So yeah, we'll probably talk about that then, because I don't think there'll be many other talking points unless something big happens, which you never know.
Maybe the return of Freddie.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I feel like it should be. We should be back in the country, or in your country at least. So
country.
Well,
I'm not Boris Johnson, God.
No, you're Rishi Sunak. No, I think, hopefully Freddie will be back, and that'll be big news. But otherwise, we'll just have to see what happens, and a few bits and pieces to catch up on as well.
Yeah. So we'll see what the fallout from Spa is. My screen's gone really dark, so if you are on YouTube, you'll see there's a massive difference, like from when we started 45 minutes ago to now. But I think that's it. Thanks to Adam. And we'll see you in a few days.
Bye.